importantly, you need to focus on the people and help them with the task. And by doing that, you will find great success in the long term. My belief. Okay. Here we are talking about the world that you as entrepreneurs, that leaders operate in. And it's what we would call a very globalized world. And it's a changing world environment. The world at one time was very small, but it has expanded. As I said with entrepreneurship, you work your business immediately as entrepreneurs in the global world that we live in. So you can just write them in the chat. What are things that are forcing us into this situation?
Sorry for interruption. Participant, this is a task for you that you have to write about this, whatever you are thinking about this issue. So please, you can write down in the chat box.
Kakali, you know what? Why don't I move forward with this, and we'll focus on some other more feedback ideas. When we talk about forces of change, we're talking about events that have changed the world, that really have had an impact. And what I want to bring forward to you is, and it's much more global. It's not small issues we're talking about, large issues. And it's to say to the people in Bangladesh and elsewhere, things are changing, and that population growth, technology, communication, outsourcing of work, the demographic of the workforce, the environment, global warming, regulation, political changes, human capital, all have contributed to these changes. Kakalik, do you mind muting your audio just for a second, please? Thank you. So all these things have shifted. Very importantly too, and I say this to you in your world, in your environment, we've shifted from this idea of this human capital, physical work. We're shifting to more knowledge work in the future. When we look at population, for example, there's currently 7.8 billion people in the world. The United Nations every few years comes up, they do projections on population growth, and they present low, medium, high projections. Well, over the last 50 years, 60 years or more, the projections have always been on the high end rather than the medium end. And most of the growth that we find in the world is in developing countries like yourself. So we're finding tremendous growth going on in the world. It's projected by 2080, there'll be 11.2 billion people. Now, when I speak of high population like this, there's a concept. It's called carrying capacity. And the idea is that the world is only able to sustain itself with 10 billion people in the production of food. There will have to be grace as a world to bring ourselves to 10 billion people. And of course we have pandemics. There will have to be grace the situation in Bangladesh. I think you might be aware that available more portable water supply. Before that, water was undrinkable. So what did people do in Europe? They drank water. They drank sea. Name is Thomas Friedman, and Thomas Friedman wrote a book, and he called it "The World is Flat." I don't know, maybe some of you have read it. Some of you are familiar with it. His name is Thomas Friedman. When he talked about Thomas Friedman wrote a book, he called it "The World is Flat." I don't know, maybe some of you have read it. Some of you are familiar with it. Not a new concept. His name is Thomas Friedman, and when he talked about Thomas Friedman wrote a book, he called it "The World is Flat." I don't know, maybe some of you have read it. Some of you are familiar with it. Not a new concept. His name is Thomas Friedman, and when he talked about Thomas Friedman wrote a book, he called it "The World is Flat." I don't know, maybe some of you have read it. Some of you are familiar with it. Not a new concept. His name is Thomas. Throughout the world as we move forward. All right. After World War II, even before World War II was over, there was a treaty throughout the world called as we move forward. And in this, all right, they recognized after World War II of the world recognized even before World War II was over, democratization, there was a treaty throughout the world called economic development. Was done this through free trade. The more opportunities of the world recognized, the more opportunities before World War II was over, democratization. There was a treaty throughout the world called economic countries. Was done this through free trade. And better opportunities of the world recognized, the more opportunities. bring the economies of the world together. In 2013 and up until 2015, there was a trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Bring the economies of the world 40% together. Of the global economy. In 2013 and up until 2015, there was a trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Bring the economies of the world 40% together. Of the global economy. In 2013 and up until 2015, there was a trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Bring the economies of the world 40% together. Of the global economy. In 2013 and up until 2015, there was a trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Bring the followed by food, frozen seafood and fish and different things like that. And I'm sure from the Bay of Bengal. And your biggest trading partner is the US, that you have followed by Germany. Now, important to understand, for all of us to understand, that when we look at products and different things produced, what we find is that the production of goods and services and products that are produced are being done in a way where there is an interdependency. And by an interdependency, I mean they're crossing borders, be it from Bangladesh to Bangalore to Beijing to Boston. They're all working together. So one piece, one product that's produced represents multiple countries and multiple businesses, both large and small. Here's an example. Here's a Dell Inspiron notebook computer. When we look at it, the display, the LCD display, comes from several different countries right here. We see it coming from Japan and Korea and Taiwan. The keyboard comes from Japan, Taiwan. The microprocessor, Malaysia and China. The memory from Japan, Korea and Taiwan. So we look at the products that are made, and it's not a single product. So when people, and here we have these barriers to globalization through nationalistic type effort. When we look at these barriers to globalization because it's nationalistic movement, be it Brexit or Donald Trump being elected, or what we see in Central Europe with some of the leaders there, and they're putting quotas and these type things. In doing these tariffs and duties and things like that, you are hurting the people in your own country, because all of these people are involved in the productions of goods and services that we find. Classic example I wanted to share with you. This is Donald Trump, just after he was elected, going to Boeing airplane factory. And when he went to the factory, he says, "This is beautiful because this shows products made in America." Well, when I look at this Boeing Dreamliner airplane, I call it the United Nation of planes. And it's a United Nations of planes because over 60% of the plane comes from parts from different other countries. Wings and batteries come from Japan. The wingtips come from South Korea. India is a source for the floor beams, and so forth. So I think when we look at productions of goods and services, especially when we look at it globally, it's made up of many different countries. And here you, as entrepreneurs, are focusing maybe on one product. But remember, one piece of a product you can focus on that can be part of a larger product that is produced globally. Here's an example that I'd like to just show you how highlights just how products are produced in so many different countries now because of our flattened world that we live in, that you can't escape it. The Kindle is a reading device that was produced or developed in 2007. Immediately, it was being produced, the different components of it, in other countries. The board, battery, and a case and circuit connector was done in China. Taiwan made the LCD panel. South Korea made the wireless card. All these things were produced in China. The Western US no longer could produce these things. I don't want to get into economics, but there's a man called David Ricardo, and he says certain countries produce things better. In Bangladesh, you make clothes. Those clothes come from cotton that were originally coming from the US, and they're produced. And then you produce the clothes, and then they go to Europe. And then the used clothes go to Africa. There's a wonderful maze of how these things go from one place to the other. I did a lot of work in Italy. And in Italy, they produce olives in the region where I was teaching and where I was doing some work. And the olives that they produced, they sent them to Africa, to Morocco. And in Morocco, they took the pits out of the olives. Then they took the olives and they shipped it back to Europe. And then Europe, they were sent throughout Europe and into the US. Everybody's hands is working on the different products that are being produced. Now, when we talk of leadership, we talk of leaders responding to change, because the world we live in, as I highlighted earlier, and I'll highlight more, is a changing world. The key factor is for you, the individuals, to have this sense of urgency for change, that you have to respond to it, not shy away from it, but embrace the change and move forward with it in a very strategic way. In the West, I don't know if this applies to Bangladesh. It very well may not. In the Western countries 20, 30 years ago, there was a sense that if you were an employee of a business, if you just were faithful, you were obedient, you were competent, that business was there for you for your life. Often in cases like in Pittsburgh or in Newcastle or Manchester or Lyon and Dusseldorf, different countries of Western Europe and the US, if your father, your grandfather worked for the business, and there was a tradition of working for that company. Today, this is no longer true. If you want to be successful, you have to be productive and add value. You have to keep learning. Your skills have to be current. And you have to show that you have that value added to the organization that you work for. I guess you can answer whether that's the case in Bangladesh now as well. Our world, at least in the West, and I believe it will occur in the East as well, have gone from human capital to intellectual capital. We've gone from the physical work to the intellectual work. And your education and the skills you have of your workforce will be your most competitive weapon that you will have in this global market that we're dealing with. Any questions? I'll just take a pause there. Any questions? Otherwise, I move on. Okay, no questions. All right. The world we live in, I do want to highlight, is uncertain times and crisis in the world. We have financial crisis, we have capital flights, we have recessions. In the West, we have housing bubbles, natural disaster, wars, pandemics, and the list goes on. So in crisis, people sometimes draw back. What I would like to propose to you, and by the way, I do want to highlight that the very idea of capitalism is being questioned, throughout the world with the different events that are happening. But I do want to highlight that in these uncertain times with crisis, and often people look to leaders. Earlier, the successful countries with COVID are women leaders. That there is opportunities, because crisis brings opportunities for all of us. Baron Rothschild said, it's time to buy when there's blood in the street, an expression. But when there's crisis, there's opportunities. And a variety of other people have talked of this as well. Crises don't create character, it reveals it. Any crisis can be good. It wakes you up. It stimulates you to do things that you wouldn't otherwise normally do. In Chinese, the word crisis is two different characters. Ji, we is a time of danger. Ji is a time of opportunity. So with that, the Chinese have tied both the concept of crisis with opportunities. Why do we have to change? What's happening in the West will be happening in the East is automation, artificial intelligence. Many jobs that were done manually or through different workforces that people had, well, through technology, they're going to change because machines, technology, different things are going to be doing them better and doing them more efficiently. However, in areas of communication and directing, of supervising, these are areas that the fuzzy knowledge is not there with the automation that we have. When we look at what is sometimes called the fourth industrial revolution, we see where software has disrupted, and when we say disrupted, has changed the order of how things are in the last 10 years. Uber, do you have Uber in Bangladesh? The ride sharing service.
Yes, we have Uber. We use Uber regularly nowadays.
Okay, all right. Uber, keep in mind, is the largest taxi company in the world, but they don't own any cars. It's software program. Airbnb is the largest hotel company in the world, but they own no properties. WeChat and Skype, largest phone companies, but they don't have telecom. Alibaba, the most valuable retailer, has no inventory. So we can see through technology, these productions, these entities are being produced throughout the world. When we look at Industry 4.0, we look at cars, electric factories to produce electric cars. The car companies in the US said, no, we need to produce electric cars. We need to look to the future to produce cars that will be self-driving. Artificial intelligence, robotics, energy is going to change, and it's going to create opportunities. Solar energy, wind energy, cold fusion. With water, water is a crisis throughout the world, but desalination processes can make portable water, drinkable water for people in the world. Healthcare, smartphones, education. Just in the short time we see how here I am talking to you in Bangladesh with Zoom. It's wonderful. But if you looked 1 year ago, was Zoom even a notable company? It wasn't. Now it's become an important company. So we see how these things are changing the world, and it will continue to change. Timelines, teams are involved. Technology is everywhere. Most people I talk to now, because of COVID, they say, well, we work at home. Well, also, post-COVID, when COVID is no longer here, they too feel they'll continue to work at homes. A particular important area that organizations are finding that they need in people, and I say this to you as entrepreneurs, is the area of soft skills, the importance of communication, decision-making, problem-solving, leadership skills, teamwork skills. These are skills that organizations are asking for and they need, and you and your businesses look to that, because it's all the ability to think and look at the customers and how you respond to the customers. In the United Kingdom, 97% of UK employers believe soft skills are important for their business. However, over 75% feel there's a huge gap between the skills that people have, the employees that they have, and those that have the ability of soft skills. A study was done with Harvard University, Carnegie Foundation, and the technical skills. But importantly, what's going to make you successful is your ability to communicate, the ability to speak to people, your ability to make decisions, your ability to lead your workforce. Which leads me to communication. And this communication we have is across a global world that we deal with. When we look at communication, and I do feel that this is important to reference and to think about, that most of our communication is not words, it's unspoken words, it's hidden communications. It's a tone of the voice. Words represent merely 7% of the message that we give. When we look at various nonverbal communications, then be it greetings or how the office is set up, or the body posture, or the smile, or the touch, and the distance that we have between people. And again, we'll talk more about this when we talk about culture. It's all imperative to understand in working with different individuals. I sometimes use, we have to listen with our eyes. We have to look and see the different ways that people are communicating to us. Regardless that the importance of this, we still find leaders, business leaders, political leaders making mistakes because they don't understand the culture that they're working with. Here's Bill Gates, amazing person, both in the business and the philanthropic areas, greeting the Prime Minister of South Korea. Well, he had his hand in his pocket and loosely shook her hand. Every newspaper carried this. How rude could he be? How insensitive could he be towards the South Korean culture? Here we see George Bush walking. This is Angela Merkel from Germany, and he goes to give her a back rub. Not something one wants to do, or Osama bin Laden, Aung San Suu Kyi from Myanmar. You need to understand, and again, we'll get into this more, the cultures that you're dealing with. Here's a few major mistakes that were made I wanted to share with you with automobiles with marketing. This is a Chevy Nova. It was a car made by Chevrolet, and they exported it to Mexico. Well, when they exported it to Mexico, no va in Spanish means no go. People didn't buy the car. Who wants to buy a car that won't go? Parker Pens said it will, with their pens, they showed a picture of the pen and said it won't leak into your pocket and embarrass you. They used the word embarazada. In Spanish, embarazada means a woman is pregnant. Well, people didn't buy the pen, and it was a huge mistake. I don't know if any of you have been to China, but in China, Kentucky Fried Chicken is very, very big. It may be the same in Bangladesh. They had a logo, a word saying, Kentucky Fried Chicken is finger licking good. When they translated it in Chinese, it means eat your fingers off. One of the classics happened in Africa. This is baby food in Africa. Gerber Food, big producer of food, baby food, they sent baby food to Africa. Now, in the region of Africa that they sent it to, there was a great deal of illiteracy, and therefore people couldn't read what was the label on things. So you generally put a picture of what was inside the product. Well, when people saw these babies' pictures on the different bottles of Gerber food, all of a sudden a big rumor started that Americans eat their children. And by the way, that rumor still exists today in some quarters. So you need to understand your audience, who you're talking to, who you're dealing with, in order to be successful. All right, let's move to culture. Any questions on anything I talked about thus far? Otherwise, I will move to culture. It looks like we got about 54 minutes. Anything else? Any questions? Okay. Well, am I talking too fast, or are you okay understanding me? All good? Okay. I'm going to carry on. All right.
I want to interrupt you, Dr. Rubies. If you feel that you need a break, at the time you can take break for 10 minutes.
I can do that if you would like. We could take a break right now would be an okay time to do it, or I could carry on. It's your choice.
Okay, you can carry on, but if you feel that you need a break, then you can feel free.
No, I'm fine, but it's whatever process you would like.
We can continue. We can continue. I think
we'll continue. Okay. All right. All right. Culture. This is a picture of Margaret Mead right here. Margaret Mead, renowned anthropologist, studied different cultures. She said culture is a collection of values, beliefs, behaviors, customs, and attitudes. Political ideologies, values, customs, food, language, gender, roles, sexuality. Every aspect of society is rooted in the culture, which reflects the belief systems and the legal systems of a particular society. And in order to be successful, what language do you speak? Do you speak Urdu, or what is your primary language in Bangladesh?
Bangla is our first language.
Bangla, okay. I could speak the language, but if I don't understand the culture, I'm going to make mistakes. You not only, you have to understand the language, but beyond that, you have to understand the different parts of the culture and the belief system. And that being more important, as we said earlier, that words are but a small part of how we communicate. Gert Hofstadter, and I'll talk about him in a few minutes, described culture as a collective programming of the mind that guides the formation of the institutions that we have in a society: family, educational, political, religious. When we talk of culture, we talk about the part, just like language, the part we can see. Well, that's a small part of it. That's 10%. 90%, and they use the iceberg as an example, comes from underneath the water. It's what we can't see, but these are the parts that are most important in understanding and operating and doing business with other cultures of the world. Now, Geert Hofstadter did a study, and it's still today the largest study ever done on culture in organizations in other countries. And he did it from 1967 to 1973 with 116,000 IBM employees across a dozen different countries. And he came up with what he called 4 dimensions of culture: societal, individual versus collectivism; power orientation, how power is distributed; uncertainty orientation, your tolerance for uncertainty; and goal orientation, what he called masculine or feminine, how aggressive you were towards goals. Later, he added what he called time orientation, which is long versus short-term orientation. And finally, in 2010, he added one he called indulgence restraint, this sense of your measure of happiness. And so anyway, it's an old study. It was done many years ago, but still it's one of the studies that's most recognized for Hofstadter. Now, I'll go through them very, very briefly and very quickly, and we can talk about them. I can respond to any questions you may have. Is your society, is your culture individualistic or is it collective? Is the focus of the culture on individuals or is it more of one that's collective, on groups? And we can see examples from different countries there. Second dimension, power orientation. How do you respond to the leader of the organization, to the person of authority? Do you have one where what we would call a low power distance, and that being one where you feel an equality with the leader, or is it one that's very hierarchical? By that there's a big separation between perhaps where a worker is at and where the leader of the organization at. Just looking at power a little bit more. When you have a manager where you are in a society that has a high power distance, the manager will make decisions often without consulting subordinate. They use their authority or power when dealing with subordinates. They seldom ask for the opinions of staff and to the staff to do. Employees should not disagree with management decisions. They do not delegate important tasks to employees. This is in a society that has a high power distance. I want to highlight the implications of this, and I'm using a disaster that occurred many, many years ago in a neighboring country of yours, and that was a Bhopal plant disaster. Now, many things contributed to the disaster in Bhopal, and immediately many people died and many people had injuries and other diseases for many, many years after Bhopal. And again, the community, the society where the people were living close to the plant contributed to this. But the main cause, or one of the primary causes, was a worker saw a leakage in the plant. And he went to the supervisor and he felt he couldn't speak to the supervisor, although spoke to him, but the supervisor doesn't listen to the employee. Uncertainty orientation. Are you someone who embraces change? When we talk of entrepreneurs, one of the characteristics we say that's important with entrepreneurship is the idea that you have a high tolerance for ambiguity, of uncertainty, of being a risk taker. And many of you are doing that in a society that may not lean that way. So, I mean, this is strongly important as entrepreneurs are developing their organizations. We have goal orientation. Again, the last of dimensions. How do you value money, possessions, cars, careers? Are you aggressive with wanting to achieve goals? Or do you look at life differently? Do you look at life that there's an important balance in life where we have social relationships, quality of life, are equally as important as being successful in ventures? And Hofstadter referred that as a feminine characteristics as opposed to a masculine, which is much more aggressive in nature. Time orientation. Do you look at things from a future-oriented perspective, or are you looking at them more short-term with the results coming shorter? And finally, the dimension he added in 2010 was indulgence versus restraints. This, he said, was a measure of happiness. And whether we as individuals in a society indulge ourselves and enjoy the different gratifications of things we gain in society, or are we one that it's more restrained, that we hold off gratification, maybe because of different social norms. So, a question, Kakali, for the different participants. Is Bangladesh a society that values the individual more or more collective?
Participant, this is your task. Please, can you cooperate with us by fill up with these? Okay, Rokia Sundana said, yes, it is collective.
More collective. Okay. Yeah. Are we more egalitarian, where we are equal to the leaders, the managers, or are we more where we have a great deal of respect hierarchically for the manager? And I'll just go through this and then I'll show you. Let's do it this way. Are we a society in Bangladesh where we have a very high tolerance for uncertainty, or a low tolerance, meaning we try to avoid situations that are uncertain? When we look at goals, are we very aggressive that we want to achieve the goals, or are we one where we're okay, we want to have more of a balance with family and life? Do we look at things from a short-term perspective or a long-term perspective? Are we a society that are indulgent, or do we have restraint, that we restrain ourselves, where we don't allow ourselves certain things that we feel we could have access to? Well, let me give you the answer what Hofstadter said, okay? Hofstadter, when he looks at Bangladesh in his research, he says, as far as individual or collective, that Bangladesh is very much of a collectivistic society. Close long-term commitments to members or group, family, extended relationship is very, very important in your culture. When we look at power, the idea of, do we look at power as far as we're equal to somebody else, or this other individual is of a higher, more of a hierarchical order? They said that Bangladesh scores very high on this dimension, which means that there is a divide between the workers and the managers, and from a societal perspective. Generally, when we look at uncertainty and avoidance, Bangladesh has a very high score. It tries to maintain rigid codes of behavior, and they don't like uncertainty. They try to avoid uncertainty. As far as goals, Bangladesh scored 55 on this dimension, and it would be considered more, as they called it, masculine. They live in order to work. They're expected, managers are expected to be decisive and assertive. Time, Bangladesh, they said, is somewhere in the middle when it looks at a strong preference for short term or long term. But when we come to the area of indulgence versus restraint, Hofstadter's 2010 dimension, he added that this is a society, again, according to Hofstadter, that does not indulge itself. There's much more restraints due to social norms and the culture and the society. And this is, again, this is a source that you can look to for to gather information about Bangladesh and other countries, by the way. So, and maybe it's a good idea too, as you look at doing business in different society, understand the cultural aspects of the different society. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. Here's something else that I want you to think about. Edward Hall, another researcher on cultures, talked about what he called high and low context cultures, and looks at different ones, at different levels. When we look at low context cultures, the US or Germany or Switzerland or something like that, they're very direct. They speak very directly to the end. If they're doing business, it's all about business. They don't take pauses in it. They're very legalistic in nature. They put exact dates and times down, and they expect people to do it. That's considered low context. So we are speaking and addressing exactly this is what we mean. High context culture, which I believe your Bangladesh falls more into that. It's more based upon different relationships, more nuance, more ideas of the different behaviors that we want to adapt to the societal norms. So this is, again, that environment where if somebody, myself, coming into the culture, I have to be aware that you may not tell me directly what going on, but you mean it. In India, and I don't know if you do it in Bangladesh, but in India, often I would direct myself and ask straightforward questions to somebody, and they would bob their head. I don't know if I do it well, but that bobbing the head was telling me something, but I didn't know what it was telling me. And it means different things, but they don't want to offend me. So maybe we give a little head bob, with it. That was India. This came from a particular author, and she said 16 ways to avoid saying no in Japanese. And the Japanese, like the Chinese and other culture, they communicate with you, but they don't say the words. But by doing so many different things, they are telling you how they feel, whether they agree or disagree, whether they support or they don't support things. And again, we in the West have to beware of societies that have a high context, as you in your country have to be aware how people can be direct and how they present information in more Western societies. Shall we talk about cultural intelligence now? Is everybody doing okay? Okay. All right. Cultural intelligence is your knowledge or understanding of how a person from other countries, race, or religion lives or behaves. And from cultural intelligence, it's, again, a global society. You're going to be doing businesses globally. And you want to develop an understanding of different cultures, their background. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I can speak a language, but beyond the language, I have to understand the culture and how they operate in order to be successful. Now, we gave out, or I gave out in a PDF form, a cultural style scale. And this particular style asks you to look at a variety of different things: managers, decisions making, how you resolve conflict, work styles, motivations, how you prioritize things, what is your level of control. There's 20 different, more direct or indirect. Is it more individual or group? Some of the items that Hofstadter talked about, as well as other items. I hope that you had the opportunity to complete the scale. And what you would do is you would just put a dot. If you said Bangladesh, for example, is much more of a society that's group oriented, and you would rate it, you'd maybe put your dot here, as opposed to States may put it down here. So there's a great deal of gap between what Bangladesh looks at from the social norm of individuality and collectivism to what Bangladesh may look at. Now, from this, what you want to do is, and this is an example of it showing Israel and Russia, you create what we like to call a cultural map. You indicate where your society is on these different items. Then you look at the country that maybe you're trading with, that you're working with, individuals you're interacting with. Where are they at in this particular framework? Do they look at communicating with low context or high context, evaluating from a delegated feedback to more indirect? Now, this is, again, Israel versus Russia. And if you look at it, you want to highlight those areas where you see a great deal of gap. So in the area of persuading, principles first versus application first, or leading, is it more egalitarian? Israel is much more egalitarian. There's an equality among people, where Russia is much more hierarchical in how they look at it, which of course affects the power relationship of how you have things. Or in deciding, is it more consensual, where we get everybody's opinion in making the decision, or is it more where the top makes a decision and everybody else has to follow? I want to, again, encourage you to use this tool and look at it and see where the gaps are. And that's the area that you want to focus in on as you interact and do business with the country. Any questions about this? Anybody? Okay. I have a few scenarios here. I'll pick one of them out. Let's do this one. You're trying to do business in Eastern Europe and are frustrated with the slow progress and unnecessary delays. You say, these people want to see every detail worked out before they can even think of moving forward. Every little change in procedure needs to be documented. Every time I think I have something agreed to, something new comes up. Can't they handle anything new? If you were looking at Hofstadter, what is the issue? Any thoughts? You want to think about these things. This Eastern Europe, you're going to have a society that's going to be more prone to avoiding and making decisions about uncertainty. They try to avoid uncertainty. They avoid this type of risk-taking behavior? Well, they came from a society from Russia being over their society, manufacture a new model of digital camera. You spend 5 days in Singapore and you come there and you want to make a decision about specific software and hardware. First day, you got jet lag. The second day, they take you to dinner, take care of you. The third day, you go to the factory. The next day, you play golf. You make decisions. What's happening? And what I would say is, as the American, you have to understand that relationship and building relationship within a culture is important in interacting with a particular society like in Singapore. And I believe it would be very just an expression that we use in English, telling the person to wait. I'll get to you later. Well, the Chinese employees takes it literally and is waiting outside the office. So you have to understand, how are people receiving the message that you communicate to them? All right. I want to just very briefly talk about this. Let's look at the time first. So we have about 28 minutes. So let's see. Let me go through about good to great, then we'll briefly talk about COVID, and then I'll try to field any questions you may have. This gentleman, Jim Collins, wrote a book called Good to Great, and it was a study. He was at Stanford University, which is in California, San Francisco, California. And it was a study looking at companies that over a 30-year period. And the study was to say, let's see companies. And he did a very rigorous way of eliminating companies that weren't influenced by outside events. But let's see companies that they were doing good, but not great. At 15 years, they had an amazing breakthrough. And then they performed 2 or 3 times greater than the stock market. And he said, I don't want to look at the individual companies. I want to understand the characteristics of companies. And these messages that you gain from good to great, you can apply to your small entrepreneurial business. And you can think about it, because these are how companies in this study became really great and very, very successful. He starts with first who, then what. And when he says first who, then what, he is saying, make sure, and he uses the expression of having people on a bus. Make sure you have the right people on the bus. Make sure you have the right people in your business. So so you're starting your small business and you are hiring employees in your small business. Make sure you have the one with the right attitude, that can act for you, that can be the best person for the best opportunity. And don't be too quick to judge, because you have to make sure. You may want somebody to be supervising a number of people, but their nature isn't good at supervising. They're good at doing the accounting. So make sure, and using the expression of the bus, that you have the right people on the bus, but that they should be in the right seats that you have. So first who, then what? Find the right people before you start to do all the other activities. Second, face the brutal facts, he says. And by this, he means don't have people that are going to just agree with you all the time and say, yes, whatever you say is correct. Have people that can challenge you, that can feel free to express what's going on and that you can gather information from them. He uses an expression, he called it the Stockdale paradox. And he says that even though you may have difficulties in your business, especially every startup business has great difficulty, but have faith that you will prevail. And he uses this man that was a prisoner of war. First, hedgehogs are very focused. They do one thing. What he says with your business, simplify it into one organizing idea and basic principle. What are you deeply passionate about? What drives your economic engine? Buy that. That's going to give you the best return. And what is something that you can be the best in the world at? And so have that focus, and he calls it, again, the hedgehog focus, but you can use any expression you want. You're passionate about it. It's going to give you an economic return, and it's something that you can be truly the best in the world at. Now, important to this is you need to develop, according to Jim Collins, this culture of discipline. And what does he mean by that? You focus on your hedgehog concept. This is a concept that's driving our business. Now, what happens to many businesses, small and large, is they become successful at one thing. They think they can do it all. And they go off doing another business and another business and another business. And what he says is, don't do that. Don't be drawn away from your primary business, what you're good at. Stay focused on it. He even says you need to have not to-do list. Instead of the to-do list, not to-do list. To stop doing important things that are not important things on that list. And important to it, you need to have dialogue and debate. And then once everybody agrees to where you're going, you go through it. But you face that brutal facts on that focus of what you're doing. Any questions? Okay. Technology. Technology is often a part of businesses, but in the West anyway, we find people that rely on technology as the answer. What he would say is technology is a supplement. It helps you, but it's really you and the people in your business that make it successful. And then finally, his last concept, he uses this term flywheel. A flywheel is kind of a big wheel that turns around and slowly builds up momentum to move. And he says your success will not come in one stroke. It won't come all of a sudden. It will grow over a period of time. And maybe that's a very important message for entrepreneurs out there, that it takes time to sustain yourself and be successful. He uses this expression that when people look for a quick fix, a quick solution, that they're often not successful. It's only through long-term hard work does success comes. They discovered in their research these leaders. What were the characteristics of leaders of the successful great company? And interestingly, these leaders, many of them came from inside the company. They were very humble. They created successors in their company. So in hiring people, you look for people that can replace you. You look for people that are you at different things. Honest, motivated individuals. And he called these individuals level 5 leaders. And we'll just skip that. And I said before that pandemics result in changes in society. And you will find these changes. And these industries are a little bit less risk, and these are even less. Certain companies, certain industries are very, very successful, being very successful during these times. Other industries aren't. When we look at restaurants, bars, hotels, entertainment, cruise lines, small retail stores, salons, real estate, utilities, certain educational, farming area. These are areas in the West that have been greatly affected by COVID. You want to be thinking about, all of you, what are the changes that COVID is going to make in society? Right now, we're doing a Zoom call. This idea of Zoom meeting, this idea of remote work, this idea of using technology to communicate, to do activities, it's something that will continue and will prevail well after COVID. So you want to think about, what are the changes? What are the industries that's going to be successful? And what do I need to do to, look at the trends, understand the trends, and to work within them? Now, in the US, Amazon, I don't know if you guys get Amazon there or if you use Alibaba or something else, but Amazon has been tremendously successful. Well, people don't want to go to stores, so they're ordering everything online. Grocery stores, people need food, and they're getting it delivered to them. Pharmacology, big pharma is doing amazingly well. And maybe a lot of these that I call winners here, and this is designed for more Western countries, don't apply to you. But you want to think, how does it apply to you in Bangladesh, in your small venture? What we see in the West, we all of a sudden see these stores opening up called COVID-19 Essentials. And they're opening up in Denver and Miami, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Las Vegas. And what are they selling? They're selling masks. They're selling different masks with team sports logo. They're hand sanitizer, ultralight devices. There is an opportunities now where people are looking at custom masks, because everybody is wearing a mask in the West anyway these days. So you in your productions can look at, where can there be opportunities for me in these things that are happening in the future. Now, this is a closing statement I do want to make to you, and it's something I believe very, very strongly in. We live in a world where there's these acceleration in technology and globalization. If we looked 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, when technology was introduced, it would take anywhere from 20 to 30 years to replace the technology. Well, now when you see a new technology come into play, well, within 3 months to 6 months, it becomes old technology. There's a speed and a pace that moves faster than anything we've ever seen before. Second, we live in a world where the problems are very big. They're global problems: climate, trade, technology, contagion. What I believe it will require is countries to be open, to have open borders, to have open flows of information, open flows of trade, open systems of people coming together. And to address the issues that will confront us in the future, we're going to need truly a global coalition. So we need it not only on the business level, but we need it in all societies' levels. Some of your entrepreneurs will find interesting. Many are from Harvard Business Review. But most important, I want to thank you for your time today. And this is, my contact information. And of course, most important, want to ask, please feel free to do so.
Okay, dear participants, if you have any question then you can write down in the chat box, or if you want to ask direct to Dr. Rovis, at that time you can raise your hands and ask him.
Moderator, I have one question. I want to know about something to Professor actually. Can I ask?
Yes, sure, you can continue.
Professor, you when you start the session, you said entrepreneur and spiritual something, like that. This is a new term actually. I don't know about anything about this. Can you little bit explain that entrepreneurs and spiritualities?
Yes.
And I love your session actually. You are talking. I gathered too much information from you actually, and lots of. I'm also Bangladeshi, but I know lots of new things to you actually.
Yes. Okay. Spirituality is a study of the uniqueness of entrepreneurs. And when we talk about organizations, we talk about people being involved in organizations, tied to organizations. And when we look at this idea of spirituality, we often think of it, the concept of spirituality, as something religious. And in this context, it's almost, maybe there is a religious, but it's more like a devotion to the organization and what you're doing. When I talked about good to great, I talked about having passion, and a passion for your product, a passion for your business, a passion for caring. In research that's been conducted on entrepreneurs, we found that there is this amazing passion that exists within them in the different products they produce, and then in their dedication to what they're doing. So very simply put, it's an idea that we looked at that is something unique and special with entrepreneurs that, by the way, we don't find with the public workers or somebody working for the government or something like that. And that's not to say anything bad about them. And I would venture to say that may we all have this sense of spirituality, of compassion and drive for whatever we do. And if it should be entrepreneurship, do it that way. But that area of entrepreneurship, we see that passion more than any other workforce group. And therefore, it's become a whole line of research looking at it. I hope that answers the question for you.
Yeah, I understand a little bit actually. But I'm looking forward to more session with you actually. I'm asking about DLeader actually, if they agree, and I want to know about more about deeply in these topics. But I understand a little bit. Thank you, Professor.
My pleasure. Other questions?
Thank you. There I have a question on behalf of Moni Hussain. His question is that when we make our marketing content for global market, is it necessary to translate the content into another language?
Well, that always, of course, is helpful. But I teach business. As I said, I'm a visiting professor at a variety of universities, or have been at a variety of universities, and currently I'm teaching in France. When I teach in France, people ask me, do you speak in French? And I said, well, my French is, not so great, très bien, huh? But I speak in English because English has become the international language. Now, I would like to caution you, though. You speak English. English, the Queen's English that you learned, we sometimes like to say, but you have to understand too that there's variance in the English, like American English, to the English that you see in the UK, or to the English you see in Australia, or to the English you see in New Zealand. I know that I was involved with people that were teaching English in China. And in China, they didn't want the English from the UK. They didn't want the English from Australia. They wanted American English. So speak the language, but still, and as I said earlier, you can speak the language, but you also want to understand the culture. So what probably is most important is, can it be translated? It depends on the country and where you're going. If it's a broad-based market, my opinion, and again, I'm not a marketing expert. If it's a broad-based market, then I think you can do it in English, that you can have that capability. Are you going to, if you have it in both languages, then you're covering all bases. But of course, you have to make sure if you translate it, then it's going to be consistent with the message you want in English. Did that answer it?
Thank you so much. Participant, do you have other question? Please feel free to ask Dr. Rubies. Already we have learned a lot of things. I think, I guess that everybody got their answers. That's why our question is little. But I request you, if you have more questions, then feel free to ask.
Yeah, or if you want, what you can do is you can think about things. Maybe you have questions later. And if you have questions, what I would say is you can submit them, as far as I'm concerned, and I can respond to them after the Zoom or at some other time, if you would like.
Yeah, sure. We got a lovely session from you, because personally I learned lots of things, especially leadership, connectivity with the people of other countries, and also the crisis management, also relation between the crisis and opportunities. Lots of things that were unknown to us. From your session, we are clear now, and hope that in the future we will get more and more informative lesson from you. And thank you so much for your valuable time.
Okay, my pleasure. And I wish each and every one of you the best of luck in your entrepreneurial adventures, as well as with your life. Most important. All right. I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'll probably sign off now, because I have to, some appointments, because it's early in the morning for me, to do some of the things I have to do. But again, the very, very best to all of you and everything you do. All right. And Sapna, thank you for bringing me in to participate.
Sir, thank you. Actually, I'm just grasping your words, like everything, like it's a new dimension, new horizon of learning to me. So thank you so much. And it's really pleasure. I'm speechless. What should I say?
Okay.